It's a people, it's a community, it's a life, it's a heart, it's a spirit.
Parents of gay children say, I want my son, my gay son, to have the same opportunity to come to me and say, hey, Dad, I'm getting married, as my non-gay son or my non-gay daughter.
The heck would you want a picture of a tattoo of $1,000 on your penis for?
You might just need to satisfy yourself sexually alone at that point.
Do I regret it? Not one bit. Did I think that I would actually take it the next step and do it again?
And what goes into their life, how they handle it. There are 12 houses, and each one of those houses has a particular function.
Look into yourself, think about it, and just be whoever it is that speaks to you.
Welcome to Talking About. My name is Jon Griffith. I am in West Hollywood, California. I was here about a year ago, met some interesting people, and I'm bringing one of them to you today, Sherri Beachfront. Welcome.
Thank you. It's nice to be here with you, John. I'm glad you're here out of New York City in the sun and in the nice weather.
Yes, I'm enjoying it a great deal. And you've got a podcast.
I do. I have a Here Networks podcast.
So it's called Straight Girl in a Queer World.
That is true. That's me.
So, and my brain always tries to reverse that. But
I know.
I got it out correctly. And you have an interesting story just throughout your life history to everything that made you who you are today. So I guess the best place to start with that is the beginning.
Yes. Well, I grew up on the East Coast like you, Bridge and Tunnel, Jersey, New York. Very early was in kiddie shows and TV commercials. So I was destined to move to New York and pursue a career in the entertainment business. I wasn't sure what that would look like. I was a dancer. I sang for my supper. And then I met my boyfriend, Zeka, who in 1979, who was a boy who liked boys, who also liked this girl. And so we became an item, as we would say then. And I was saying hi.
People driving by.
Yes, people driving by. And that was lovely Jay, who's a choreographer. Oh. We're in West Hollywood. It's all fabulous. And so Zek and I became an item, as I said. We were lovers, partners, creating a band called Get Wet. Came up with the name Beachfront. My name is Sherri Lewis, but AKA Sherri Beachfront, which I use as my host name for the podcast. And we had 2 top 40 hits on Boardwalk Entertainment with Neil Bogart. And Neil Bogart had discovered Donna Summer, Kiss, The Village People, and the Boardwalk label, the standing, had Ringo and Joan Jett and the Blackhearts.
Okay.
So that label folded early on, two singles up on the charts. Neil died of cancer early into that career. The label folded, and so did my career and my relationship with my lovely boyfriend. He went back to the boys on Morton Street Pier.
It's been known to happen.
Yes. Yes, I would have gathered that. But I was so full of substances, cocaine, which wasn't addictive in the 80s.
Back then it wasn't.
It wasn't addictive in the 80s, so I numbed the pain with much cocaine and champagne, all things that rhymed. And it led me to a disastrous outcome of homelessness on the streets, shooting heroin and cocaine, and I crawled into detox in 1983.
Okay, so well, I guess you had an awakening of sorts, just to help your...
Slow. Very slow to get my brain to come back. All I knew is I was dying, and the one thing I knew is I didn't want to die. I didn't know that drugs were going to kill me. I was using them to deal with pain, and then the solution became the problem.
Okay.
And so when I got to detox, and then slowly one hand came out and said, maybe rehab for you. And this was another recovering person who had become a counselor. And so I moved into rehab, 6 weeks, Then I went for long-term care, which they suggested because that's how demented I was.
Okay.
And I went for an 18-month program in a state institution in Paterson, New Jersey.
Good old New Jersey.
Good old New Jersey, called Straight and Narrow, which is still there, and it's on the corner of Straight and Narrow Street.
Ah.
And it's almost like a pun, though. How I could live. I mean, I was such a colorful beachfront girl, popping out of cakes at Studio 54, hanging out with Lou Reed, you know, and then my California life, doing the show business stuff. That to end up in such a black and white situation in a state institution called Straight and Narrow, it was, you know, it was pretty wild. So yeah,
and
pretty
somehow
dank.
fitting.
Yeah, it was very fitting. And like I said, it was a black and white film. It was like the Wizard of Oz went reverse. I started off in Technicolor and I ended up in black and white.
Okay. But you're back in color.
I'm back in color. And so I was fortunate. I was fortunate that I got clean and sober. And a year and a half into that recovery, I moved back into New York. I got a regular job, regular for me, working for Betsy Johnson's Boutiques. And I met my fiance, soon-to-be husband, a year and a half into my recovery. It was 1987.
Okay, and there were a lot of things going on at that time.
There were a lot of things going on. There were announcements in my 12-step meetings about so-and-so's in the hospital, liver failure, so-and-so, we don't know what's wrong. Of course, the gay disease, as we now know, AIDS, was there. But in the rooms of recovery, which were, you know, mixed, they were not gay meetings. It was shocking to hear like the IV drug users and the heterosexual community was now dying of a disease that they were not being diagnosed with because it was supposed to be a gay disease.
Right. Yeah, and yeah, as we know,
it was so crazy in '87 to even think such a thing.
Yeah, a virus knows no orientation.
That's brilliant to say, and why they didn't know it, I don't know why the denial was so strong, because it was so terrifying. I mean, when you look back and have experienced those days, a lot of viewers and listeners in my podcast, I always try to emphasize, you can't imagine what it was to not have that consciousness, and all of a sudden, you know, your whole world was this death sentence. And so what happened for me was I went and saw a friend of mine, a girlfriend, who was dying at the ripe age of 29. And they never diagnosed her with AIDS, but she was put in an isolated ward. She was dying of AIDS. She had dementia. She was wasting syndrome. And her mother sat in a chair in the corner of the room in an isolated ward where AIDS patients were, of course. And she said, "We know what she has, but we're not going to talk about it." And a few days later, Lori died. And that's why I thought, wow, I should get tested, because I had a few gay friends at this point who I was visiting in the hospital that looked like that were in isolated wards, that you had to wear gowns and masks and gloves to come in to visit them. So
this is the beginning of a period where people who were going to a funeral a week, or if not more.
Yeah.
Just because, there was so much that wasn't known at the time.
It was a death sentence. It was a hopeless situation. So I was perfectly healthy.
Thankfully.
I didn't have a symptom or any reason except that I had witnessed the death of friends. I had no other reason to be tested except that then the test was brand new. It had just come out, and I was brand new. I was clean and sober, and I was in love, and I was 32 when my biological clock was ticking. So I thought, I got to get a clean bill of health because I want to get pregnant right away, so let's just get this AIDS test over with, after tremendous anxiety. And I was shocked when this lovely doctor in the state of Massachusetts said, "Don't worry about it. Nobody tests positive here. This is Massachusetts."
Oh boy.
And right. And 3 weeks later, on April 12th, 1987, my 33rd birthday, the doctor called and he said, "I am so sorry, your test results are positive." And like many of us, life has never been the same.
But I mean, just thinking, had you not had the foundation of recovery to get through that?
Yeah.
So everything, there's a sequence for a reason.
There was this, and I saw it that way. I did see it that way, and I'm grateful because I became a counselor, and I was a counselor for almost 15 years in the recovering community counseling HIV. And most people, when you gave results, just said, oh, fuck it, I'm going to die anyway. Mm-hmm. And I just knew that God had saved me. I really felt my higher power had picked me up, knew what I didn't know yet. And if I was vigilant, every day I just thought, this too shall pass, and if I do what I can in this 24-hour period, maybe I can change the course of this. And what it did was it sustained hope for me in a hopeless time. And it also sustained probably my wellness without medication for the first 15 years.
Okay, well, I mean, you turned it inside out and started reaching out to others. That's community service is one of my most favorite things.
Yeah, me too.
And you've done a lot in your lifetime, and you continue to do so.
I do my part. So, people do so much that it's hard. I'm always overwhelmed by the goodness of people, that they do so much. I mean, I know our community and the gay community we have many positive doctors now who do so much service on top of treating patients, and there's so many of us in this army, and it is a war that's still on, and AIDS was the terrorist of the 80s, and it still is a terrorist. And I wish the American public would understand that AIDS in America is not cured.
Right.
And people still die. It's not gone away. We have experimental treatments. Experimental. Costly, difficult to take, don't work for everybody. We don't have a vaccine or a cure, so the war's still on.
And the infection rates are rising. People are getting complacent.
And we saw that from the last conference, the last AIDS conference in New Mexico that just took place. The numbers, they were devastating. It was not it was not a hopeful conference in that the numbers of women, African Americans in general, have escalated. The gay community, my lovely community, has escalated terribly. Some of it, crystal meth didn't help. An addiction, but just the fatigue of condom use and not hearing the message of barebacking is not safe, even if they have an undetectable viral load, and it's ongoing to keep the dialogue going. So I appreciate you putting a focus on this today.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's a topic that we really hammer out on the show, a couple times a year. Just because you have to. And just, going back to community service, I think if everybody did one day of community service per year, the world would be just so much of a better place. One day, one little day.
Yeah. And it's something that you like. I mean, community service is not like, the AIDS walk.
Yeah. Or even breast cancer walk. Or
any kind of,
that relates to you.
There's so much. MS. My niece was diagnosed with MS a few years ago. It's a disease that affects people when they're young also. All of a sudden they're walking, and then they're stumbling, and then they're not able to, function like they used to, and they need experimental medication as well. And, there's so many causes.
So, yeah. And, jumping forward to the podcast, how did that evolve?
Well, it evolved through the Ribbon of Hope Awards, which I had never heard of, but it's been taken place for years, but never televised. And Here Networks was the first to say, wow, this is important. David Milburn, who really brought it together, televised the first Ribbon of Hope Awards for Here Networks, and they invited me to be their keynote speaker, which essentially was their positive speaker. Okay. And when I did that, which was really a lovely experience for me, because I got to see Judith Light, who's a great AIDS activist and a wonderful actress that I adored seeing most of my life and still do. They invited me to do something. They weren't sure what they were going to do with me. And then they said, give her a podcast. And I didn't even know what one was then. I mean, I'm 54. I don't know what a podcast. So then I said, okay. And they flew me to New York, and I was a guest on the Josh and Sarah podcast in New York, very popular. And from there, I met with Eric Feldman, who produces all the podcasts. And he said, go ahead, go for it. And I said, how about straight girl in a queer world? Because basically that's me. And do all things HIV. And then it's even expanded really causes, different nonprofits, people who are living positive, people who are living in recovery. So it's expanded.
So it covers the rainbow of humanity.
It does cover the rainbow of humanity. It started off with HIV because, of course, that was what I was...
You start with what you know.
What I knew. And then my mission, I think, for the program is that AIDS is a part of the fabric of our life now after 25 plus years. And I wanted to just have it in the conversation because it needs to be remembered. It's awareness. And... So the show's been doing well. It's been just a year, and my producers are happy, and it's moving on, and I'm very happy.
Well, yeah, people are listening, and that's just great. Where can people find out more about the podcast?
They can go to the website, Here TV website.
HereTV.com.
Yes, and you'll see a plethora of information there. And when you go to podcasts, press podcasts, and they'll all come out, and you'll find Straight Girl in a Queer World. Subscribe today. It's free, and hopefully you'll have fun and you'll learn something. Lots of organizations, as I said, are highlighted on there. The Gay Rodeo a couple of weeks ago, which is fabulous. Cross country, ways to participate, and they always give to a nonprofit. And that's amazing.
Yeah, which goes back to community service.
Yeah, there's so many ways.
Yes, yeah, I am so grateful that you took the time to spend with me. There is a link to the podcast on our website, www.talkingabout.info. Check it out, listen, subscribe.
Yes, and write me at straightgirl@HereTV.
Okay, straightgirl@HereTV.com.
It's either HereTV or
it's HereTV.com, I believe.
Yeah.
There's such a variety of great stuff on that website also.
Yes. You have all the films that are out, the TV shows, and of course the podcast. So if you look at where the podcasts are, you click on the podcast and you can subscribe, and it's free. It will automatically download, and I would be happy to have you listen to the podcast weekly. We have great guests. I've had Cheryl Lee Ralph, who is an original dream girl from Broadway, for those of you who don't know.
Right. Well, I mean, a lot of people remember her from her film work and from the sitcom It's a Living.
Right, and Jasmine Guy.
Okay.
And Greg Louganis, who HIV-positive gay man and Olympic champion.
So is the full archive on the site?
Yes.
All the back shows?
All the shows are there, just to give that example. And one of my favorites, of course, was the Gay Rodeo I mentioned to you, which I just loved. And lots of them. I mean, Randy Jones from the Village People.
Well, what sparks your interest in a guest? What makes you say, I want to go and meet this person and have them on the show?
When they're doing something that's something positive for the world. You know, I mean, it's funny, people didn't realize Randy Jones, the original cowboy, the cowboy from the Village People, you know, his career took off in the center of, you know, what was going to be the tornado for AIDS and the height of disco. And I never realized that the Village People were like all about service. Like, you know, we think that it was all about sex and drugs, and it was a party pre-AIDS. But, you know, all their stories, YMCA, it's like there was a lot of Americana involved. But Randy has always been an activist and outreached for causes, especially HIV/AIDS. So anyone that's been involved trying to make this world a better place and has a cause they can plug, I'm very happy to have them on. That's pretty much a lot of people who are living with HIV. I find that's powerful. And because mine's audio and not video, they have the anonymity to do that, to talk about their recovery from addiction, to talk about living with AIDS. And I know that's powerful because when someone in the Midwest or in a small town is, you know, feeling isolated and not connected to hearing the stories that they need to hear, that they're not alone. And they can contact them through the internet
that's a tremendous
and the
power.
phone. That's tremendous power. Yeah. I want people to know they're not alone, because I felt alone being a straight girl in a queer world.
Which is the name of the podcast.
Yeah. I mean, I was alone diagnosed with HIV in a world where women were not in the demographics yet.
Right.
And they wouldn't even diagnose a woman with HIV because they thought women didn't get it. So I know what that's like, and I never want anybody to feel that they're alone and there's not help for you. And now I get to be the positive host on a gay network. And I like that it bridges to straight listeners, to transies, to the bisexual community, because surely that was where I was, and to, of course, the gay community, gay and lesbian community. So it's for everybody. It's a non-discriminating disease, and hopefully my podcast follows suit.
Well, I mean, you've accomplished so much in such a roller coaster of a life.
Yeah.
And it's the ride's not over.
No, it's a lot less of a roller coaster, though, I'm happy to say. California, the move here, yeah, it's true. It's more like Surf's Up. It's much more West Coast. The sun shines 99% of the time. The weathermen here really need jobs. They have nothing to do. They stand in front of a map and they just go 75, 75, 75, you know, and then it goes 65, 65, 65 at night. And very rarely do we get rain, which is not a good thing, but it's hard to get a good depression on here, which is a good thing.
Yes, that's always a good thing. And again, HereTV.com. There's a link to that on the www.talkingabout.info website. So just redid the website fairly recently, so it's got an archive of almost 100 shows on it, and this one will be part of it.
Oh, that's great. And I'm on Facebook, of course.
Okay.
Because I'm like a teenage girl.
Actually, my friends say that about me.
And they're probably right. I mean, we met on Facebook, part of it. We met in person, but then we connected on Facebook so that I knew you were coming out here.
Yes. So, and thank you for that.
Yeah, no, thank you. I love that.
And thank you for helping to get your message out. Such a great message. HereTV.com, www.talkingabout.info. I'm Jon Griffith, and I'm with
Sherri Beachfront from Straight Girl in a Queer World.
Thank you. I will see you next time.